this episode, I was delighted to be joined by Rory O'Connor from Hub Games. So delighted. We kind of didn't record an intro. So, here's an intro. Intro! And now, on with the show. Don't say that, because I'll just turn up.
You'll be turning up, you know what?
I'll just be turning up. I'll just feel like, hello.
I miss that. People don't just turn up anymore. My dad used to do it all the time, and whilst I used to bemoan it when I was trying to get home from his work, I appreciate now what it meant that you got to see people, and they didn't have excuses like, you know, oh, I've got stuff on. Whereas if you turn up, people kind of make the time and are grateful for it afterwards, usually. Yeah,
my mum likes that. She likes, she says sometimes she's like, depends on how she's feeling. She's like, oh, just give us a phone. But sometimes you just like rock up and just like that gentle surprise. And I think some people just worry about, you know, is my house looking as in brilliant a form as always? And it's like, I'm not here to see your house. I'm just actually here to see you.
I have to keep pointing that out, that you really don't, you know, care when you go and see someone's house. Or I'm not the kind of person to look around, and check the quality of their floor.
No, I'm not checking, not like moving ornaments to see if there's like a small ring of dust and kind of like get the white gloves out and kind of go, oh, okay. So it's like that, you know, is it like that? Is it? I don't think, but
like, I know, honey, we're leaving.
Exactly, that's it. You know, and I'll see you later, and and you'll get a report in the post of how kind of, how clean your house was.
Yeah.
Exactly. Marks out of 10 from the various judges. When you were a young lad, have you always been kind of Belfast? Because I'm not hearing the Belfast kind of lilt.
No, I'm a Dubliner originally. I grew up in a little town called Lucan, which was just outside Dublin.
Mm-hmm.
And then moved, after college, I moved down to the west of Ireland and lived in Galway.
Oh, right,
for a while, and kind of ran away to join the circus. Like, I joined a community arts group called Monmouth down there. And so whilst the friends were in university, I was actually trying to be a puppeteer and studying in London. So I used to travel back and forth.
That sounds fast. No, that sounds... I mean, what did you do at college?
So I spent 2 years in actually an amazing place called Ballyfermot Senior College, which is almost like a portfolio preparation place for people who studied art, which is what I had done. And I studied computer animation and graphics. And I didn't realize just how on the cutting edge we were, because I think it was only the second year of that course, and Pixar had only released its famous Tin Toy short like about 2 years beforehand.
Wow.
Because I was like, oh yeah, that's been around for ages. And then I was like, oh my God, it was only like 2 years beforehand.
Is that the one where it was under the bed and it's got the little baby kind of chasing after it? Is that, because there was a series of kind of like Pixar shorts, and one of them was when the kind of the lamp, Luxar Jr. and Luxar was one of my, because I just remember watching that, taping it and watching it again and again and again, because I was just fascinated by everything from the light sources to how they made the materials look, and it was just absolutely kind of amazing.
It was incredible. Yeah, there was Luxar Jr., Tin Toy, and there was one about like a unicycle as well, an abandoned unicycle. And then there was the very first one, something like Harvey and the Bee or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but that was like the very first one they did, which I think was like 86 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I was, I thought I was going to have a career in computer animation, and that all kind of changed pretty massively.
What made you leave? Was it just, you know, not in it? Were you not kind of getting the spark? Because, I mean, going to do kind of like puppetry, I mean, that's a very, very creative, kind of owned, creative, kind of almost physical acting type of process. I mean, to me, it's one stage up from kind of animating something to elicit emotion. I mean, puppetry to me is kind of you're eliciting emotion straight away from your reactions. You can see a direct reaction from the person that you're kind of interacting with, kind of thing. It's the next kind of level up to me.
So yeah, I think you're kind of picking up on why it was attractive. In my second year of college, and it was a 2-year course, an old school friend of mine had committed suicide. Right. And he had left a note saying, he couldn't see a way out, basically, or how things were going to improve. And it's kind of weird that at that point I kind of decided, okay, I'm not going to allow myself to get to that point where I feel like that about life. I knew how easily you could get to that. And around the same time, this kind of childhood interest in puppetry just like resurfaced. And I can't really put the two together, but in that latter half of my year, I was spending less time on computer animation and more time trying to build puppets with another classmate. And it was kind of tied into what you're saying. It was like the idea of, it was still storytelling, but instead of like being locked away in a room working on it, we were actually out traveling, seeing people and interacting with them directly. And so at the end of that year, I moved down to Galway to work with the closest thing to a puppetry company in Ireland, which was Mockness. And they used to do big scale kind of street theatre festivals. In the Galway Arts Festival, they were famous for it. They've also done the St. Patrick's Day parades in Dublin over a number of years. And they famously did the U2 Zeropa tour. When they had all the big heads, I got to be one of those.
I remember that.
I got to be one of those heads in Dublin.
Oh my goodness! Did you actually get to meet like Bono and the crew and everybody like that then?
No, I got to watch the gig through a big head.
So, who did you play then?
Well, this was just when they had like the kind of generic crowd.
All right,
big heads, yeah. So, some of the people I worked with were like the main actors on the stage. But yeah, I went down to work with them, kind of volunteered and got whatever paid gigs came up, like learned stilt walking and juggling. But saw that power of actually interacting directly with people through performance. And what I always liked about puppetry then was that it was about putting the puppet form forward and not yourself. Like the irony was like, I loved puppetry. I was pretty good at it, but I hated using my voice, which was a real like difficult if I wanted to do street theatre or anything like that. So I ended up doing quite eclectic shows that used recorded music or silence as part of it.
Because I'm a big fan of the documentary Being Elmo. And for a while, it was one of the things that my kids would just watch repeatedly. And his thing was always about the kind of the emotional connection and how he, the voice. I mean, Elmo's famous because of the voice kind of thing. But I mean, were people surprised when you went into the puppeteering? I mean, were you always when you were growing up as a child? Were you kind of shy but willing to put on a performance, kind of if pushed kind of person?
No, absolutely not. And that's like the irony. Like if someone looked at me weird, I'd start crying. I was just so shy growing up. And this all feeds into, I think, gaming as well, is that I just like always love to play. And for me, the power of puppetry isn't in like that aspect of the character, and it was more to do with bringing inanimate objects to life and people believing them as being real. And it was this almost like childlike awe that I could take a salt cellar and imbue character into that. Or in one performance I had a Venetian blind that is like sobbing over the fact that the curtains have like broken up with it and left. And so it was the idea of imbuing a playfulness, I think, was important. And it's, a big part of how I approach, I think, the game design side of things. But that to me was the magic. It was like you could look at this inanimate object and people would suddenly believe that it had emotions and had a thought process going on. And I think that's just wonderful, seeing that awe on people's faces when they see a well-performed puppet show.
Well, Pixar continue to do that with the animated shorts that they've done. I mean, they did the one with the two umbrellas meeting in the rain. It was kind of like that kind of thing. There was the one about the Chinese dumpling. And these are all about kind of taking everyday kind of normal objects and kind of instilling them with their own kind of form and their own kind of personality in order to elicit some kind of emotional response. But how long did you then stay in the kind of the puppeteering, the community stuff? Did you stay in that for a while, or did you get to the point where it's kind of like, does it become financially viable? Is it something that you can continue to do for a long time? I mean, what made you decide to flip from being out there and performing to almost embodying that in a game so that other people could get kind of enjoyment out of your creations? I mean, how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, it was quite a weird journey. I think lived in Galway for like 4 or 5 years, and in the meantime, I was traveling over to London to study with the London School of Puppetry. Yeah. And that was like a remote course that I did. And I was trying to make it work as a puppeteer, but I didn't have a driver's license. I didn't have money to buy a van. And living in the west of Ireland, like not having transport was like made it virtually impossible. So in the end, with my partner of the time, and still my partner, Anita, we decided we wanted to go traveling and try and do something different, and we planned to go to Canada. So I actually managed to get a job in a multimedia company in Dublin. Still, funnily enough, like my storyboarding skills that I developed as a puppeteer were what kind of landed me that job, and my kind of quirky take on teaching maths. So I worked there for a year, and basically we saved up enough money to head over to Vancouver. But that didn't work out. We weren't able to get work permits because graphic designers were 2 a penny over there. And
okay.
That was Anita's qualification, and despite being amazing at what she did, they were just like, nope, we've got enough graphic designers. Wow. So we did some travel through the US and came back. And I it was quite humbling. I couldn't find any work in Dublin. This was kind of like pre-Celtic Tiber and the economic boom over here. Yeah. And an old college friend told me about a project in Belfast where they were looking for someone to teach multimedia software as part of a cross-community project. And, the timing of all of this, I think, is quite interesting to what's going on now, because it was just after the Omagh bombing. In Northern Ireland while I was away, and I realised I really didn't know much about Northern Ireland, despite kind of growing up on the same island. And so I kind of jumped at the opportunity to go up and actually spend some time in Belfast and learn more about it, whilst kind of using the skills I developed in things like Photoshop and Dreamweaver and all of that software from back in the day, and teaching it to people. So I went up for what I thought would be a year, and then it became like 3 years, and then 5 years, and got more involved in the cross-community side of things. And as part of that, became really interested in the idea of creativity and accelerated learning, because I was trying to figure out how to teach these in a better way. And I had picked up some things in that multimedia company about how people learn. So I was trying to use that as part of that course in Belfast. And it kind of sent me down this rabbit hole of just amazing tools and techniques that were out there to help with learning and creative thinking. And that kind of became my toolbox then for, I became a kind of like a life coach, but a kind of creativity life coach, because my life was a mess. So I couldn't really, coach for success, but I could, stand behind helping people to be more creative in how they tackle problems. And so I did that for a while, and as part of that, I actually created Rory Story Cubes. Because one of the person I trained with, Win Wenger, he used to say, the best use for a creative problem-solving technique is to use it to create even better creative problem-solving techniques. And so I used one of the techniques he had designed called Beachhead, or Advanced Civilization, and used it to invent a creative thinking tool, which actually turned out to be Rory Story Cubes. But at the time, it was like a Rubik's Cube with stickers on it with different icons. And that was essentially the origin of Rory Story Cubes. So I used to use it in my coaching practice with people to help them use it for creative problem solving. And just more and more people kept using it the way it wasn't intended, which was like just for making up stories. And you're like, no, hang on, this is meant to be a coaching tool. And I'm like, but it's tons of fun just making up stories with it. And so I had to kind of start to pay attention to how, it was actually being used, and realized there was a much bigger audience for it than I remember thinking, like, I reckon there's about 1,000 coaches out there that might use, the Metacube, which is what it was called at the time. And it's kind of funny looking back now, thinking how lofty my goal was back then. Given that, I think we're kind of hitting like over 8 million copies of Rory Story Cubes out in the world at the moment.
That's incredible. I mean, when you kind of put it out there, I mean, you must still be going 8 million. That's an awful lot more than 100 or 1,000. Does it still surprise you?
Yeah. It's wonderful. But what's really funny is, like, a couple of friends have like since confided, and they're like, yeah, Rory, we thought this was just another one of your harebrained schemes. And I was like, well, thanks for telling me. Because I used to go around with like this Rubik's Cube and, tell people how awesome it was. And, I thought it was great, and it was good for creative problem solving. And, we were literally like the elves and the shoemaker, myself and Anita, where we actually landed a job with a major financial organization in Dublin. And as part of it, I was running this program called the Innovation Hub. And the intent was to deliver creative training to them. And, part of what my offering was like, oh yeah, and everyone who takes part will get a set of Rory Story Cubes. So they agreed to it, and I was like, oh crap, now I have to figure out how to get them made. So with the money we were getting paid for that work, we basically got 500 sets made, gave them the 36 they needed for the program, and started selling the rest. We set up a web page and a PayPal account, and just started taking orders online for this little game in a black box, as it was at the time. So, and that was it was really interesting, because even then we sold, I think, about 2,000 copies just through word of mouth, like with no big marketing or anything. And when GameRight, who we connected with back in, I think it was like 2009, they were interested in the game, and we agreed, for that they would sell 10,000 copies of the game was the target. And I remember thinking, where are they going to find 10,000 people to buy Rory Story Cubes? I don't know whether it's, growing up in a small country like Ireland, but, your sense of scale is completely off compared to growing up in a country with, 1 billion people living in it. So I just had a much smaller sense of what was achievable, and happily we kept getting surprised by the fact that more and more people wanted to buy and play Rory Story Cubes.
Did that offer you some kind of flexibility? Because I'm looking for people who aren't aware of Rory Story Cubes. They are basically cubes that have different pictures on them, and they're very simple pictures, but it can be anything from somebody swinging a baseball bat to like a smiley face. And the idea is you roll the cubes, and then based on the pictures that appear, you kind of make up a story kind of based on that. But you seem to have like Adventure Time ones and all different kinds of flavours, colours, kind of themes and everything like that as well. But has that put you in the position where you're kind of like, well, has it provided kind of like a steady stream of income kind of going forward for you?
It did, yeah. I mean, we've since the last kind of 2 years, we sold it to Asmodee because we felt we'd taken it as far as we could, and yet we knew there was more people still discovering Rory Story Cubes, but we just were, I think, burnt out at that point.
Cubed out.
Yeah, like we kind of set a plan back in 2011 or 12 to do all the mix sets to cover all the different themes and genres that we wanted to cover. And we saw that coming to an end. So we kind of felt like, okay, it's time to, pass it on, because it was still like a ton of work, and the amount of traveling we did and turning up to like trade shows and demoing, like the amount of times I was humbled, not in a good way, like standing in a tiny little store on like Cape Cod or something, and demoing Rory Story Cubes to 2 5-year-olds who happened to turn up to this like event where Rory O'Connor, the creator of Rory Story Cubes, is going to be here. And you're like, yeah, okay, no one cares. But the store owners did, and they, got behind the game. So we really did a lot of like touring with Rory Story Cubes, and I think that's what helped it to take off. And it just got to a point where it was like, okay, we don't really need to do that anymore. It needs something else, and we're not the people to make that happen.
Do you kind of get sad at all? They're saying like you've let your baby go, kind of thing.
Yeah, it was hard. Like, there's a point where Anita was kind of going, I'm done. I need to move on from this. And I was like, well, I can kind of like spend my life sitting on this kind of throne of Rory Story Cubes and be the only thing I've done. And I went, that's not kind of who I am. So I used to describe it as like watching a child going off to college. Sending them out into the world and crossing your fingers and going, I hope I brought them up well, and they're not going to phone me up at some point from a cell and go, Mom, Dad, I'm in trouble. Can you come get me? So luckily that hasn't happened yet. That they're being well looked after and they're in good company. So yeah, it's great to see it kind of continuing to reach more people. If I look on Twitter and you still see like a mom or some workshop facilitator going, oh my God, have you seen these things? They're called Rory Story Cubes.
I mean, with that, then were you back to the kind of the creative stage? Were you saying, right, did you feel there was a pressure to look for the next thing? As in, this is what Rory did next kind of thing. Was there a bit of internal pressure to kind of find something else that would be kind of as successful? Or did you just like, well, let's just see what else we can do? And I've done successful. We're kind of in certain places. We've just been purchased by one of the biggest board game distributors, in the world now. So did that allow you to kind of focus differently, or were you still kind of hungry and anxious to kind of chase something else?
I think a couple of things were coming together within the game space. Like, I'm a big gamer. I love playing games, and it was often hard to hear that people say, "Oh, Rory Story Cubes isn't a game," and so there was a part of me probably looking for acceptance within the game design space. But I think the whole thing with Rory Story Cubes is it actually brought my full skill set to bear, which was taking a bit of my dad with the kind of entrepreneurial aspect of it, and just the passion for what Rory Story Cubes represented, and getting out there and talking to people, because we kind of joke, there's not many game designers you would put in front of the public to explain their game to them. Whereas we were able to do that, quite social and quite friendly. So there's a lot more going on with Rory Story Cubes than just the game design. So, but there was a part of me that didn't want to be a one-trick kind of wonder. At the same time, I care a lot about life, the world, how people think, and, going back to creativity and community work is helping people to see there's more to life than they might think, and there's more to themselves than they might realize as well. And that was really the kind of driving passion. And I remember seeing the Kickstarter for This War of Mine by Awakened Realms and thinking, that's what we should be doing. Like, that's the stuff I care about, is, challenging people through a medium. I used to do with puppetry. It was challenging people with the kind of coaching side. And was like, right, we need to be doing this with games as well. And I could see a change coming, and I wanted to be part of that vanguard rather than looking back and going, oh yeah, that could have been me. So the timing of those things all came together where we were finishing off Rory Story Cubes. We had, I'd seen that, the Kickstarter, and that was mulling away kind of in the back of my mind. And also we just in 2017, we knew we had to bring out some new games. We couldn't continue with just Rory Story Cubes. Although having said that, what's really interesting is we did bring out a product called the Extraordinaires Design Studio, which wasn't a game, but it was an activity that taught the principles of design thinking to kids and adults. And it's actually hugely popular in the US, but was never seen as a game. And I think that was a really shining example of what happens when myself and Anita put our heads together to try and create change. It was a really playful toolkit that hopefully will, create designers of tomorrow that they look back and say, oh yeah, I got interested in design and change because of this thing I played as a kid in school called the Extraordinaires Design Studio. So we did that alongside Rory Story Cubes, but it didn't get the attention it kind of really deserved because of just how all-consuming Rory Story Cubes was. So in 2017, we were really looking at, we have to bring out something new and something different. And that's kind of where Untold and Blank came from. Untold was Untold Adventures Our Wait, which was our kind of role-playing game based on Rory Story Cubes. It was kind of like our swan song. We were going, right, if we don't make this now, this game is never going to get made. And we really wanted to have it out in the world because myself and John Fury, who I worked with on it, he was a huge champion and fan of Rory Story Cubes, constantly coming up with new ways to use them. And we had talked about this idea of how Rory Story Cubes could be used almost as a games master for role-playing games. And we just kind of talked about the idea of creating a self-contained system rather than needing a D&D manual or, Dungeon World or some other system. So we kind of worked really hard on that. And then also at the same time, we were working on Blank by Henri Comerac, because we just thought that game really epitomized what we thought games could be like. Very simple idea, but has incredible potential contained within it.
Yeah. Blank's fascinating to me because it's almost like its own little self-contained kind of legacy game, but the actual elements of the legacy game itself aren't decided by the creator of the game. As in a legacy game situation, it's like, name this character, and you name the character, and that's kind of about it. Whereas in Blank, it's like, okay, well, you've played the game, but what rule would you like? So that effectively there's no two decks of Blank could effectively end up kind of being the same.
It's I adore Blank as a game, and it really it frustrates me that it's so hard to communicate to people the magic that is inside, a box of blank. Because if you just look at the surface, you'll think, oh, that's just like, Jack Change It or Uno or something like that. And you're like, no, there's so much going on in this. But I keep talking to people and saying, like, to really understand the game, you have to play it. And when you see the moving parts, you go, oh my God, now I get what this is about. And with blank, it's that act of winning a game and saying, okay, so now, how are you going to change the game? Are you going to draw a picture? Or are you going to write a rule? Or are you going to create a game effect? And the light bulb goes off. And when we were developing the game, what I loved was in the studio, someone would come in and say, oh, I was playing blank last night and we made up this rule for the game. And everyone else would suddenly be like, right, I've just had an idea for a game, for a rule card. We need to play blank, and I love how it keeps sparking those ideas and how, what seems like a simple game is intentionally designed to play simply initially because it's the pacing of the introduction of those new rules is important. That pacing of it is really important, especially for people who aren't used to playing, those kind of legacy games where things are changing. But I just love how you can go totally meta with blank. We used to make up rules where it was like, okay, when you play this card, you get to nominate another player. They must make a cup of tea for everybody at the end of the game. It's just like really weird and bizarre stuff. My daughter came up with one and it was like, you can't say yes or no in any language. Otherwise you take a penalty. And so as part of the game when you're playing, you're trying to have this conversation with the other players and trying to nudge them into saying yes or no. And I just love that aspect of everyone has a different take on the kind of rules they want to add to the game, which makes the whole experience completely hilarious and unique every time you play it.
Is it important in the games that you create, you're eliciting some kind of emotional reaction that in some ways is just above kind of like the normal, did you have fun? Yes, I did. But are you trying to get people to kind of think more and think about people? Because it sounds like blank to me is not just I'm going to write a rule, it's I'm writing a rule and seeing how it affects kind of people kind of like around me. If you're playing Rory's Story Cubes, again, you'll be playing it in a group and it'll be, let's see how everybody kind of gets together and kind of gives their ideas about how they can make this kind of story kind of work. So is that kind of what you're kind of aiming for, is that emotional kind of response within the game is quite important in how you kind of approach the kind of the game, the games that are part of hub games?
I think that is a big part of it. Like when we switched from Rory Story Cubes, people used to just think, oh, you just make educational games because of Rory Story Cubes and the Extraordinaires. And my view would have been, well, no, actually make games that foster imagination, and empathy. And so when we started hub games, we had to be really careful, not to just go chasing any shiny thing that caught our attention. And we had to be kind of really strict with what we were going to publish because we felt if it's a generic game, there's lots of companies out there that can do a really good job of good games. But we had to be doing something particularly different that only we could do. And, I think that was partly that whole background in community and creativity and creative thinking informs a lot of the types of games we consider for hub games. So we ended up kind of deciding on, I describe it as like 3+1 things when we're thinking about games. So one was we want games that really foster interaction between the players. So we didn't want games where essentially they're solo experiences around the table and then you just add up your points at the end. We and I think Mega City Oceania is a really good example of that. As is Untold and, Holding On and Blank, you're constantly interacting with the other players the whole time that you're playing those games. Then we wanted games that kind of get people to reflect on the game afterwards. They leave you thinking about the game whether that's, the emotional impact of playing, holding on, whether it's the story or character you created in Untold, or the rule you created in Blank, and thinking, I can't wait until I play it the next time. And then the third thing was allowing for that kind of creative aspect, or the playful aspect, was games that allow you to express yourself as you play. Again, Blank does it, Untold does it, Holding On actually does it, because you don't have role cards in that game. So it's totally about your personality as a nurse influences the game. And again, with Mega City, it's how you choose to design the buildings that you play with. And so the last element then was, I could only describe it as games that create this kind of moment for players, where something happens in the game and you're like, that's kind of interesting or weird or neat. So Flip Over Frog, I literally, when the designer behind it was presenting the game at Essen last year, when I saw it, I literally made that involuntary sound the first time I flipped the tile over in the game. And I joked about it with the team, and every time we demoed the game to people, whenever I demo it, they all go, that's kind of neat. And I was like, and that's why we love this game, because it has that little bit extra that surprises you. So that's kind of our filtering process for deciding on games. It must tick at least one, and ideally two, if not three, of those kind of criteria.
But Holding On's a difficult game to play, depending on the kind of the age that you are as an individual and your own kind of life experiences as well. In the case that it is, in all honesty, it was probably one of the first games that I played through which was difficult to play. And then when I played through it, at certain points, I kind of was glad I'd kind of finished it, because I needed a rest. I needed a break, because it brought certain memories, kind of back. And, was there questions about that when you were kind of going through, even bringing out the game? Was a question, should we tone it down a bit? Should we not make it maybe as quite difficult as it was? Because in a sense, what you're doing is you're saying, right, okay, either we're going to try, we know it opens up as like, he's going to die. And you're like, oh, okay. So we're not actually saving. It's like, no, he's going to die, but you've got to decide whether or not you're making him comfortable, or you're trying to instill some kind of communication with him, and one or the other is going to have positive or negative effects. So when you were going through the process of that, was at any point did you kind of say, is this a bit too much? Should we maybe kind of tone it down a bit when you were looking at, when you were putting together kind of Holding On?
There's so much going on in that game.
Yeah.
And I think I was starting from the perspective of, I really want to make a game that sucker punches people, and to show them that a game can actually do that. Because the way I think about gaming at the moment is, people tend to play games from their head. And it's all about the metagaming and winning and maximizing, that experience. And so the kind of challenge was like, can we create a game where, even though players maybe consciously know what they should be doing in the game, emotionally they're being pulled in a different direction to make less than optimal choices.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things. The other was just going back to my mum's, my own experience. My mum has Alzheimer's, and actually, as we speak, she is moving into a care home next Monday. And my dad passed away back in 2002. So like the idea of death and dying, is kind of, it's weird. I talked with Michael a lot about this, who's also, he's Irish. And the notion of death and dying and illness seems to be slightly different in Ireland, which we didn't really realize. And it's a kind of a mixture of, I think, our kind of Celtic roots and also the Catholic way of dealing with death, where we've all seen open coffins and, gone through the process of waking the dead. And that kind of informed the idea of people who are old and sick and maybe, young people want to steer away from, have lived incredible lives if you just scratch the surface and see beyond the person who's in the bed. And so we kind of wanted to convey that idea that, you can have incredible stories told by ordinary people, and they don't have to be sci-fi based or fantasy based or merchants trading in the Mediterranean. That there's audiences for other games, types of stories out there. And Anita would be a big advocate for that as well. So, that was one element we were trying to combine. A big part of it was also the fact that, what does it mean to save someone? I think this was a question that we wanted to pose in that game, because we knew people would naturally think, oh, well, to win this game, I'm going to save this person. But, what's the point in saving someone if they're just going to spend their life suffering as a result of it? And so it might make you feel better as a person, but you're not actually helping the other person. So we wanted to challenge that notion of what does it mean to actually win or to help. Whereas in the case of Billy, and if you get to the end of the game, it's like he's got his 3 regrets, and all he wants to do is unburden himself and be able to trust someone enough to tell them those 3 things, because he's never had the opportunity to do it in his life, and he does not want to die carrying these 3 regrets with him. So if you saved him in the game and he left the hospital, he could end up dying and never have unburdened himself. So did you really help him? That's kind of the idea within the game. And it also brings out that notion of the idea of hospice care, that sometimes people get to a point in their life where trying to save them medically isn't actually the solution. It becomes about how comfortable you can make them, and also can you help prepare them for death as well. And again, that was something I witnessed with my dad and researching the game, seeing how, particularly with heart attack patients, it's only recently where kind of medicine has switched from constantly trying to save the person to sometimes accepting actually the best thing we can do is make them comfortable. Because if we're going to try and keep them alive, they're just going to continue to suffer as well. So I think the game challenges a lot of people in that respect. But at the same time, there's times where I've never laughed so much as I have playing Untold, because of how Billy can be a stubborn, cantankerous character.
Yeah.
And you're like shouting at him going, for the love of God, Billy, we're trying to help you. And the kind of passive aggressive team system of like assigning people to work and the conversations you have about that, I think it's that kind of bleakness creates quite often very humorous moments. And I've watched, so many people playing the game and have that happen. And it kind of saddens and frustrates me a little bit when I hear people say, oh, that's a really serious game or really depressing. I'm like, well, it's not. I think if you try to rush through the game and play it back to back, that's hard work, I think, because the game does have, an emotional load to it. And that can be maybe difficult. You need time to process it. And another thing, sorry, all these things I've wanted to say about the game. One of the things I find really fascinating is...
It's your night. Okay.
I don't know if you've ever watched Father Ted, where he wins this prize
all the time,
like best priest, and he starts like listing all the people who ever wronged him over the years.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I'll have my list. So one of the things I find really fascinating about Holding On is essentially it's cardboard and some words, and yet we kind of conjure up this character for people. And they're very quick. Players are very quick to project their own meaning and interpretation onto that character. And so, I don't know how much I'm giving away by saying, Billy's from Belfast. I think you learned that in the first part of the game.
Yeah, I think it's, I think it's kind of, I think it actually says it pretty early on.
Yeah, so people are very quick to say, oh, so I know he's X, like he's a member of a paramilitary group. And, I'm like, well, how did you decide that? Where did you get that information from? And you see it constantly where they just get glimpses of information about the character and they make like defining decisions about that character, and they're not even taking the time to get to know him. And if they play through the game, what I find really fascinating is those views will all get challenged along the way. So what I love about the idea of holding on and, why we plan to make more is that the game presents you with characters who you wouldn't necessarily meet in day-to-day life. And, we kind of want at some point of the game players to be challenged and say, well, do I like this person? Do I not? Do I want to help them? And what does that mean? And what does that reflect on you as a person that you can't maybe tolerate something about that character? I think that's a really interesting space to explore and give voice to people who maybe don't often get heard, but we have the opportunity to do that by having them lie in the hospital bed in front of the players.
There's a real sense of realism to the game itself, in the fact that as you said, the win condition is finding out as much information as possible and actually making them relaxed and almost accepting of what's actually going to happen. And the only way that they can be accepting is if they actually manage to tell people what what is kind of almost preventing them from shuffling off. You know what I mean? As in kind of like, they're staying because of pure will alone. And it's like they've got like last things, the last couple of things that they need to do. I don't remember there being a game kind of like that. And I don't know if it was just the subject matter. But I mean, to me, it struck me as the game that you could, would you want to create more content for it, more expansions, a slightly different game? Or would you want to kind of say, right, we've done that and have it kind of like as a self-contained thing and maybe not, dilute the experience? I don't know, because it's obviously, to me, it's a very, very different experience from anything I experienced as far as a game. And yet at the same time, I'm wondering if you did more of that, would you be able to have the same emotional impact? But I'm interested to see, but at the same time, it's almost like a lovely, perfect little experience on a box. I don't know if I'd want to do another one. It's really kind of confusing. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of confusing.
Yeah. I think, like, when we came up with the framework for the game, we had to decide what character was going to be in it. And we knew it had to be the extraordinary life of an ordinary person. That's kind of the line we came up with. And then when we realized that, we were like, oh my God, there's so many people around the world who've lived incredible lives. And, we have relations where we discover on their deathbed some incredible things that happened to them and decisions they made. So for us, when we thought about it and we thought we've got one shot, if we have only one shot to do this, we need to tell the story of Billy Kerr, because we are the only people in the game world who could tell that story and do it justice. Because it was based on lots of stories that we were hearing whilst living here in Belfast. And we're kind of like pulling all them together into his story. And even the choice of Billy as a character, there's actually, for people living in, say, Northern Ireland, even the name of the character gives away information about that person and would indicate that, traditionally me and with my name would have been perceived as, almost enemy of Billy. And so we intentionally chose that angle and that perspective from which to tell the story, to tell it from like the other side. And I think personally, I think there's lots of stories that can be told in this way. Not only from the perspective of us refining the experience, but there's so many, as we thought about it, we're like the different kinds of people we could put in front of players and the kind of challenges that we could present them with.
Yeah.
And open up their eyes a little bit more to the world in a way that, they mightn't have through games, but you might get through books. But again, the difference being with a game, like there's a interaction that happens in holding on that is really key, like the repetition of caring for the character and the kind of the slowly drip feeding of information means that, again, things that you thought were one way are suddenly made clearer later on in the game. And and the payoff for that only comes from the fact that you've spent time with Billy. So I think, if you read the narrative, yes, it's a powerful story, but it's nowhere near as powerful as when you combine it with the time that you've spent with Billy as a character and experienced almost that repetition. Because when he finally tells you something, like, oh my God, that like all makes sense now. So I think there are other stories to tell, and we do plan to tell them with, possibly different endings. The system is more like a framework and we'd adjust it depending on the character and the story that we're telling. So we're already at work on plotting out the life of the next character whose story we want to tell. And it's very different. So, sorry, what I was trying to come back around to is the story of Billy is really powerful and all the more powerful when you can relate to his world. There's so many little things where I was playing it with playtesting with people from Belfast and they would just look at a card and go, because they just in a picture or in a turn of phrase, they were like, yeah, I recognize Billy as someone of my world. Yeah, whereas I think for anyone playing outside of, realistically Northern Ireland, because even in like Scotland or England, you have a different relationship with Northern Ireland. And if you're in the US, my God, like the amount of people who just got stuff completely wrong about, his world. So we would look at choosing a character that's maybe more familiar and identifiable to a wider audience, without generalizing it. But we would hope that they would have that same experience, that people who recognize Billy as a real kind of person will see that in this next character and really get the benefit of that experience through the knowing hints and clues that we would include in the cards and the narrative.
I'm just wondering how you can top it. I mean, was it when you went and did something like, when you went on to do like Mega City Oceania and Adventure Mart, was that almost like a cleansing of the palette kind of thing? Because it must have been a relatively difficult game to kind of work on from an emotional point of view as well.
Well, working on Holding On was weird because I had a real crunch period where I had to work out the whole storyline. I think it was in November and December of 2017. And I remember like walking around Belfast and I just had like these two worlds overlapping. There was like the happiness of Christmas, and then in my head I had all this history of like Billy's life and world and what I was researching, but like overlaid on it, where I was literally walking down streets going, oh yeah, this is where that thing happened.
Yeah.
And so that was quite odd and really intense. But I don't know, like I like those kind of stories. So I really like the idea of challenging people and getting them to kind of think differently about the world. I suppose that's just what gives me a kick, if I can facilitate that in some way. So yeah, I think we're kind of like, okay, after that, let's do something a little bit lighter for a while. I don't think we could have gone straight into Holding On.
No.
Too. So yes, I think Mega City again was just one of those kind of those playful things where I saw Tokyo Jitaku at Essen, and Jordan Draper, the designer, was showing it to me. And like, I kind of said to Jordan, I was like, oh, so hang on, it was a speed building game. And I kind of thought, well, but if you're an architect, because my brother was an architect, I was like, it's all about building the city and crafting it, and ideally you'd want to have something to show at the end of it. And so I kind of pitched this idea to the team. Jordan was really on board with it. He was like, yeah, if you want to do anything with Tokyo Jitaku, go for it. And I went back and I kind of pitched the idea to the team, that I thought, again, if Holding On was about like delivering an emotional sucker punch to players, my kind of pitch for the idea of Megacity was like, can we get Euro gamers to play? That was literally it, like, as if they're playing with Lego. And as we were talking about the game and kicking around some ideas, I said, like, let's just look at what we're all doing. And we were all fidgeting and building with Jordan's pieces. And I was like, that's why we need to make the game. And, Michael's brain was firing straight away on. He was like, right, okay, I think I know how I can make this work, and very quickly he came up with a rule set that he worked on with Jordan then. And then with Anita, kind of refined the player experience and the usability of the whole thing in terms of the graphics and imagery. So again, that was that kind of question of, how can we solve a problem or, challenge players a little bit to maybe be a little bit more playful. So I think it's that kind of puppetry, childlikeness of trying to bring a bit more play into games.
But it's tactile. That's one of the things. Usually when you play buildings in games, like buildings in, like, say, Little Town, or even Tiny Town, or any of these games, they're usually they're there as representations. They're not usually as so tactile that you are, it's like, I've built a building, and the token is a representation of you building a building. It's not a case that you're actually going in, getting your hands dirty, and actually physically building the building that you're building, if you know what I mean. And that's what I saw. Who did I see? I saw Suzanne, from Dice Tower. She raved about it. She just went, look at this. Just look at this. She goes, I'm touching it, but you can look at it. And it was that kind of, impression that I got, is this is going to be something that even before you started playing, people are going to be picking up these pieces and they're going to be fiddling about with them. Because it's that kind of game.
And that's what we were doing with it. And I think some of the magic is in the design of the pieces that Jordan came up with initially. They're just really interesting shapes of, figuring out how they fit together. But I think part of it is, it's funny because when I look at how Michael thinks, Michael Fox, the designer who works with us, he's got an incredible math brain, and I have the honor of talking with the likes of Matt Dunstan and Matt Leacock and Tony Boydell and seeing how their brains work. Like, my brain doesn't work like that. I can't do the math in the same way that they do in terms of working out probability and, what the rule set would be. My thing is like, what's the visceral experience I want players to have? And I think that's what allows me to see the potential for something like Mega City, because I'm not approaching it as a math question. I'm approaching it as a playful experience. How, what's the experience I want players to have in the game? And I think that's why we've got, so many games where you're building a city, but essentially it's reduced to numbers, because that's how the thought process works. And also then there's factoring into the cost of production and manufacturing makes it easier to make tiles than it does to make, the plastic pieces that we have in that game. But it's just, I think I just look at the world through a slightly different lens that maybe allows for those quirks to emerge. And hopefully people would see that in an upcoming game we have called Prism Arena, and because it's got that weird toyetic element to it as well.
Yeah.
And it's just I realize I'm just a big kid who wants to play, like. So I just keep making games that allow me to do that, and every now and again, cry when I play Holding On.
Is that what attracted you to kind of Adventure Mart? Because I had kind of the DigiSprite team were on the show, and that was. They were talking about, we had a chat about Adventure Mart. I actually wrote a preview piece on Adventure Mart as well.
Oh, nice.
And, I thought there was a lot of potential. There was a couple of things that I wasn't 100% sure about, but obviously when you're writing kind of like a first thoughts piece for Kickstarter, it's always about, well, you have to you can't really kind of give a full kind of opinion on it. You can give kind of thoughts on what you've been kind of given and what you can think about it. So when like Robin and Elaine were like, yeah, we've been signed, I was like, okay, I was interested to see what you guys would do with that project, because to be perfectly honest, it didn't. When they said they were signed with Hub Games, I kind of went, Holding On Hub Games kind of thing. Yeah. I was kind of, I was wondering what, and I must admit, I'm entirely fascinated by the spin or what you're going to do with what you've been given. Because to me, it was I enjoyed what I played. I thought it was really, really interesting. I loved the artwork on it. The artwork was absolutely stunning. I loved the idea of what it was promising. And then when you guys is like, well, we're working with Hub Games on this, I was just like, I'm kind of really, really interested to see what you guys will do to it.
So, it's funny because I'm like the person who comes back to the team and was like, I found this thing that's kind of interesting. And I go, it's like bringing a pet home. Like, again, Rory. So, like, when I saw at UK Games Expo, I was running around halls to meetings, and I kept passing by their booth and seeing the game. I was like, that just looks, it ticks one of the first boxes, as it's like really visually attractive as a game. So I was really curious to sit down and play it, because I think when I play a game, I want to look at something that looks beautiful, and Adventure Mart looks beautiful.
It does.
When you play it. So I was kind of curious, and I loved the spin on this fantasy 7-Eleven idea. This kind of modern convenience store in this kind of fantasy world, selling, imagining customers coming in and browsing and looking for these items. So I played the game with the guys and asked them, could I borrow it overnight to play during the expo? And I played it twice, and we're like, there's something really neat about this game. We're like, yeah, there's bits that are a bit clunky and things I'm not sure about. But there was definitely, I loved the interaction in the game. And I think, for me, it addressed certain issues with when you're trying to teach a deck builder to people for the first time, and they're like, wait, what? You put the card I just bought into the discard pile? Like, and how many rounds do you go through where the person keeps asking, does this go into the discard pile?
Yeah.
So what I liked about the concept of Adventure Mart was that people know the idea of like buying and selling. And so it made everything had an intuitive sense to it, that when you explain the rules, they're like, oh yeah, I get why you would do that. It isn't like, why do I move this pawn here and get these two resources and trade them in for, sheep? It kind of made sense. So I kind of presented it to the team, and they were like, they really liked the idea. And again, we recognized there was maybe some things in the game that could be improved to make it more accessible. And really, we kind of thought we could actually bring this game to more people. Because my fear and my experience with a lot of Kickstarters is that you buy into the idea of the game, but what actually gets delivered quite often doesn't quite live up to it, and the game ends up sitting on a shelf and not getting played. And I was like, I don't want that to happen to Adventure Mart. I think this is too good an idea to have that happen. And it's very easy to get caught up in that with the demands and requests of the backers.
No.
So, we spent a lot of time playing the game and, going backwards and forwards with the team where we didn't always necessarily agree, but, we'd say, look, we want this game to reach as many people as possible. So how can we, streamline some of the experience, take there's some really hard edges on like how you could screw with other players. And we were trying to manage that a little bit. And also improve the first game experience for people as well as the kind of UI experience of the game. And I actually, I kind of went through an arc of, I really like this game. And then it was like, oh my God, why did I do this? Like, it's so much work as you're trying to get everything just right in the game. And then towards the end of the development, I was like, this game is so much fun, and we're playing like 2-player games and just having a blast of how we were like trying to outsmart each other and pulling off really fun combos in the game. I was discovering things going, I never knew you could do that in the game. And we began to really see the space for the game of how we could, develop new cards and guilds and things that would really broaden the game out. So it's sometimes it's a little bit hard to think how it fits into our criteria, but it definitely has the interaction bit because of the selling and how you're trying to outsell each other. I really like that interaction, which is often lacking in a deck builder type game.
Yeah, there tends to be kind of like, sometimes in a lot of deck builder, it's like the theme doesn't, if the theme wasn't there, the game itself wouldn't be any different.
Mm-hmm.
If you know what I mean, if you look at like, say, Star Realms, if you took away the stars stuff, you would still be doing like the same kind of moves.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing, and I'm a huge Star Realms fan, everybody, so don't kind of come and get me. But the thing that I liked about Adventure Mart is you were actually going ahead and buying stuff. You were bringing in employees, so all the mechanics and everything like that kind of made sense for physically what you were doing in the game. So the theme itself was fully kind of embraced in the game. I must admit at the time because there's a lot of the people that I have guessed in the show going back their campaign on like a $1 backing just so I can keep up with the updates and stuff like that. And I got the cancelled notification through and I was like, oh, what? Because it was kind of doing well at the time. Mm-hmm. But at that time, there seemed to be a raft of cancellations, kind of one company after another seemed to be saying, oh, look, we've got to like go back and relook at everything. And I was just like, oh, what's going on here? And of course the update comes through and goes, oh, we're being signed. But it means we've got to cancel it. And I was kind of like, oh, cool. So that's good. So I'm kind of interested to see how it compares to the prototype, which I think I actually still have. I really should send that back. If it becomes really, really successful, there will be a prototype heading to eBay.
Yeah.
If it becomes like the $1 million board game, original Digiprite. No, because they'll come after me.
Yeah, they'll hunt you down.
Well, they've got my address, so they effectively know where I live, so they don't even need to hunt me down. They could just turn up. And they're only in Dundee, which is about 45 minutes away, so it's like, I'm not really hiding myself very well, so there you go.
But one of the things, with that, I think we tried to bring out more of in the game was the idea of owning a store. So now you can kind of rehire employees from day to day. And the way you get the fixtures and everything has a sense of this magical sense of owning the store where you like banish employees to trigger effects. But there is more of a sense of ownership of that store from day to day, which we really wanted to bring out a little bit more of. So if an employee is useful, you'll keep them on for the next day. If they're not useful, you'll just banish them to the abyss, and hire someone new the next day instead.
You had to make it dark, didn't you? You had to take it there, didn't you?
No.
See, the holding on bit is still very much in there,
Yeah, maybe that. Well, it was already in the game, so I think we just maybe that's what kind of attracted me to it.
Made it a bit darker.
Yeah. It's not dark enough. Let's make it darker.
What would you like to do next? I mean, is there a genre? If it wasn't a commercial thing, because obviously you're a business and you've got to keep an eye on what is going to sell. But is there a style of game that you would love if somebody says, "I'll tell you what, I'll sort the money out. You just go ahead and create something." Is there any kind of genre you would love to kind of create yourself, put together?
Well, I'm kind of doing it at the moment. So right now I'm working on an arena combat game, but it's very different in that the characters are kind of younger characters. It's a very hopeful game where you're protecting the seed of hope from despair, and you're training together. So the idea is you're helping each other to get better and level up and improve. And in that game, I'm trying to address some of the issues I had with games like Crossmaster Arena, which visually I loved, but in terms of trying to teach it to children or non-gamers, it was really tough. So people who would be drawn to the game found it hard to play. So I wanted to make a more intuitive rule set for people, so that the game actually scales. The more you play it, the more you get to do with the game. And that was a big thing for me because I love the spatial aspect of arena games, but they're often quite dark as well. You're killing people and it's, chaotic and dark and broody. And I was like, why can't they just be fun and bright and optimistic and positive? So that was kind of really how we came about. Even the concept of the game is you're fighting and channeling your prisma, which is your inner light. And you're channeling it into blasts and strikes as you move around the arena, sparring with your partners and Mokon, which are cute kind of like Pokemon-esque creatures that embody different emotions like anger and happiness and jealousy and fear. And they give buffs to your characters. That's been a real labor of love over the last 2 years. That's finally coming to fruition. And that's one of where I was saying earlier about the kind of toyetic element in that game. Yeah. You are going to get to customize your hero with stickers. So when you start the game, you'll take one of the 4 characters and that will permanently become your character. And they all start off with a blank slate. They're the same as each other. But as you play, you will get to change their appearance, change their hairstyle or facial expression, and you'll earn uniforms to indicate your rank within the arena. And at the same time, you'll start to gain powers that make it a bit more like Hero Clicks or Crossmaster Arena. And that the amount of work that's gone into making that customization work has been incredible. But again, I keep thinking of it from a child's perspective, and us as big kids, what would be fun with this game, and again, what's just enough to keep it interesting and accessible, but also adding enough kind of tactical strategy to it to keep it interesting for adults as well. Because when I think of that game, I think of me going into a shop and picking up the game and holding it out to my kids and going, "Would you like to play this? I'll buy it for you if you want to play it, because I want to play that game. I just need you, my child or whatever, to agree that you'll play it with me so I can justify the spend." So that game has been is a kind of a tick box for me. I do a lot of solo gaming as well, because just with work and family, by the time I get to sit down, it's usually the evening, so I end up solo gaming. So I would love to work on a solo game experience that is really tight, that can be played in a short amount of time and has enough of a feel of, some narrative to it, that allows you to kind of take it out of the box and replay it again and again. So I've been kind of noodling an idea for that. Whether it'll ever happen, I don't know. But that's something I would like to work on. And there's a couple of other kind of odd ideas out there that, again, come from part of my cross-community work here and personal development work. So kind of ideas around social science and psychology quite often inform my game ideas. So there's a couple of things in there I'd like to explore as well and try and bake them into a game, because I love it when a game holds up a mirror to people, and the choices they make and how they behave, and they maybe have that kind of moment of, recognizing themselves within the game.
Yeah. I mean, I want the sticker game. Like now. The introspective one, I can hold off after the sticker arena game, please.
You want dessert for it first?
Always. Yeah. I've got that middle-aged spread going on, so to me it's dessert, then main meal, and then have some more dessert.
Well, kind of thing. Actually, I have an earlier iteration on Tabletop Simulator, which I'm actually due to update. So maybe by the time this goes out, I can share a link where you and others can go and find it and play it. Obviously online it won't have the stickers, but
That's like opening up the freezer door and going, look, you can have this ice cream, and then shutting the freezer door again. That's what that's true. Like. But if people do want to keep an eye on you and, check out where we can find you on the interweb nets, where can we find you on the interweb nets, Mr. Rory O'Connor, sir?
On the interweb nets. So you can find me directly on Twitter at Rory O'Connor, RORYOCONNOR. I'm usually more responsive than active on it. So I don't read a whole lot of stuff on it. I usually respond to things there or share something interesting I've learned or discovered. And then there's also We Are Hub Games, which is like our Twitter handle, our Instagram account, and our Facebook account. And that's usually myself or Michael dealing with that.
And obviously we will make sure that we put all of these links in the show notes so that we have got notes to show. Thank you very, very much for coming on. This has been absolutely fascinating to me.
Been a pleasure. Like, really, I love these conversations. It's like I was saying earlier, chatting with Ben. Like, you guys just come at things from a different angle, and it's nice, I think, to see the humanity behind the games and not just be talking about the games and the systems themselves.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. No, I really, really, really appreciate your time. If you have listened along tonight and you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, go to the internet webs, go to the Googles and search for We're Not Wizards, and you shall find us wherever we are in all these different worn out places and worn out faces. And if you like what you've listened to tonight, there's a couple of things you can do. Go and tell somebody else in the street. Walk up to that person that you see them every day, and you just walk up and say, have you ever listened to the We're Not Wizards podcast? And, tell them, because that's the way that we spread like some kind of non-malicious virus, I would like to say, in this winter weather. The other thing, of course, you can do is you can check us out on our various Instagrams and Twitters as well. And you can go to Apple Podcasts and you can drop us a rating or a review. If you are going to be giving us a rating or a review, don't give us 10 stars. This is very important because it does make me very big-headed. And on the other side of it, don't give us 1 star because it makes us cry. Give us something in the middle, like a 5, because it's average. And we're just a little bit average. But the person who's not been average tonight is rather wonderful, rather fantastic, Mr. Rory O'Connor. Thank you again, sir, very much for coming on.
Thanks a million, Richard.
Okay. There's only 2 more things to do. Remember, we're many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Rory?
Yes, I am. Actually, my children think they asked me, was I a wizard? Going, Mom, we know you're not a wizard, but Dad, you might be.
Oh my word. You ruined it right at the very end. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from the sudden disappointment. Rory. Say goodbye, Rory.
Goodbye, Rory.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll sixes, make something awful, and maybe ask the wizard question at the beginning of your show so you don't get to the end and realise you might have just potentially wasted an hour and a half of your time. But until the next time, keep holding on, and goodbye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.